Hello, and welcome to Solving for the Undefined podcast. I'm your host, Johanna, founder of Miss Kuiper's Classroom, the place that equips teachers and parents in helping students struggling with on-grade level math. But it's not always about the numbers, and that's why I'm here, bringing you the formulas to solve your problems, math and otherwise, and helping students gain confidence in academic abilities. And that's what you can count on. Hello. Welcome to my first ever interview podcast episode. I'm here today with my mother, Davette. She's been an educator for, as long as I've known her. And then she's been teaching elementary students with tutoring and administrative work sprinkled in. And according to her, I've been in the classroom ever since I was a baby. I remember her telling me stories about how I'd be in the back of her classroom. So I've literally been in school for my entire life. So going with her and hanging out in our classroom. And then she also did after school care at our elementary school. So I got to hang out even after I graduated elementary school. I got to hang out with her at her school. So she's part of the reason why I became a teacher. Personally, my first teaching experience was in her classroom. I got to teach a math lesson about graphing and coordinate points, and it was a lot of fun.
I remember
so that was my first teaching experience.
I have pictures of that, actually.
That's
it was
so
in
cool.
our school. It was in our school newsletter too. You got famous right away.
I'm awesome. All right. So, without further ado, will you tell us a little about yourself?
Well, I love being your mom. Does that count?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Well, I think you said a lot of good things about my background. I had always wanted to be a teacher. I do remember in elementary school, I had some teachers that all I could think about was, I want to be like Mrs. Warren. I want to be like Mrs. Ruiz. They were really wonderful role models. And I remember when school let out for the summer, I used to go hang around by the dumpsters because I wanted all of their materials they were throwing away for the year. And I would take them home, and I would teach school during the summer to my friends in my bedroom with a little chalkboard that was, I don't know, like 14 by 16. I'd have them in my bedroom, and we would use those workbooks that I had snatched from the dumpster. And so
that's so fun.
Yeah, and then it continued that way. I just kept pursuing it, and I took a break between high school and college, and I went back to college, and I changed my major from education, and I was so unhappy. I was extremely unhappy. And my parents said, "You've always wanted to be a teacher." I mean, when I was in second grade, they gave me this giant teacher desk. They knew that was sort of my calling. So I went back to school a little older, finished college, got my degree, got my credential. And my first job was in a small private school in the Bay Area, which I ended up being associated with that school for the next 30 some odd years. And as you said, I had teaching from anywhere from third grade through seventh grade. And I've been very blessed. And I was very motivated by my godmother. She was an incredible educator in the Fresno Unified School District. And she was a big influence on me, kind of a mentor. So, yeah. And I've just loved seeing both you and your sister go into education.
Yeah, I think we both went into education because we saw how you were a teacher and how amazing you were doing with your students in the classroom. And because we were part of your journey as well, like being there all the time when you were a fifth grade teacher or when you were doing administrative work at the school, like we got to be part of that. So I think that was very motivational for both Esther and I, my sister, going into the education field.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's interesting because as you guys have come up through more recently college and credentialing, the tables have somewhat turned, and I've started learning from you guys things that are new and things that I can integrate into my teaching and into my classroom. So it's kind of fun. It's kind of fun that now you guys are there for me when I need help, encouragement, mentoring.
That's fun. That is kind of like a full circle of
Mm-hmm.
life.
Amen.
Yeah. I never knew that about how you were when you were younger, taking stuff out of the dumpster to teach your friends. It kind of reminds me of when I would teach Esther preschool stuff. Like
Exactly.
I'd have class with her and I'd teach her. I don't even know what I taught her. I remember making index cards. We had like felt animal stickers.
Mm.
We'd like put there and like make their like scene and write facts on the back. Um, so that was a lot of fun. That's what it reminded me of. That's so
Yeah.
cool. I'm
Yeah.
glad we have that in common.
Yeah.
So as you went from college and you got your first job in the Bay Area, since you became a teacher, what has been your journey as an educator?
I think when I first started, I was very, I think I was um, rather strict because I was out of fear of anything that might go wrong and I wouldn't know what to do if something went wrong and was out of my control. And thinking that I was, you know, I had to do it perfectly. I had to do it to the book and being very legalistic about it to the point where now I really love integrating the personal relationships I have with students, getting to know them, getting to know how they tick, and being able to enjoy being in the classroom and not being so rigid with facts and rules and guidelines that I miss the joy of teaching. I think that has come with the journey. And that would be what I would tell a first year teacher. Don't get stuck in, being so rigid in your classroom management that you miss getting to know the students, because that will help your classroom management, and bringing the parents to be in on having good relationships with your parents. And that's what I missed in my first years, I really believe. And I'm glad I came through that, but looking back, that would be what I would say to other teachers.
That's so cool. Not to, in your classroom, not to miss the joy of being a teacher, especially since most teacher programs are so long and so tedious in a sense. Whereas once you're in the classroom, to learn to be in the moment and enjoying being with your students and building those personal relationships. I love what you said, that building those relationships with students will help you in your classroom management and being able to conduct a classroom that's not only conducive for you, but all of your students in learning and success.
Yeah.
So that's awesome.
Yeah, because coming out, especially in California, coming out of credentialing and induction programs, it's all about the standards, it's all about evidence and data. And, you know, moving past that to find your style in the classroom is really key to enjoying teaching and not getting burned out and not being too rigid.
I remember, or at least Esther, she's going through so much right now as a California teacher, like having to do 2 ed TPAs. I did not know they had to do 2. Like, I remember just doing 1, and that was like so much work. So I can't imagine doing 2. But I hope that she and other teachers who are in her position, like, are able to, once they're in the classroom, find that joy rather than like looking at the data and the standards and all of that. And also, side note, but I feel like classroom management, once you have a style, like it only works for 80% of the students 80% of the time.
Mm.
And that's even when you have those personal relationships with students. So imagine how much harder it would be to manage a classroom without having those personal relationships with students.
Yeah,
That
I
would be
think
crazy.
I do think there is something, the old adage where you don't smile until December, and you don't, laugh until December as a teacher, because you got to set your rules and you're not a happy counselor. Um, but at the same time, really using your time to think about your students and watch them and see who they are, and will really help set the tone. Yeah, it's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
80% of now say that again.
So classroom management works with 80% of your students 80% of the time.
Yeah.
And that's once you've built personal relationships. And
Yeah.
that comes from like the envoy aspect.
Mm-hmm.
At least that's what Michael Grinder says.
Yeah.
And he's done way more research than I have. So I'll take his word for it.
Yeah. And that's true. And I could probably tell you every year which students were in the 20% that it didn't go well or it didn't work. And that actually, if you spend time thinking and, learning and if you need someone to bring alongside you to get to that 20% and you need advice, whatever it is, that just makes you a better teacher. That makes you more well-rounded instead of putting up defense and say, well, I'll never reach this student, or this student is the student every teacher talks about. Be the one that's different. Be the one that, brings that student in, even if it's just for a time. Somehow connect with them so that it makes you a better teacher and makes my goal is always to want students to love to learn. So why doesn't that student love to learn? What is the barrier? What is the behavior? What is something that is keeping that student from coming in and enjoying school and loving to learn? It could be something out of your control. You still have to find a way to embrace that student.
I love that. Finding the barrier in which is keeping them from loving to learn. That's awesome. So I know recently that you changed schools from being a fifth grade teacher to moving to another school and being a fourth, fifth teacher, like as a blend. So can you give us a little background on kind of the two jobs and how they've been different, if that makes sense?
Yes. Yes, it took me a while to adjust to that because it's when those fourth graders come in September, they're just little third graders. They're not fourth graders yet. They're third graders, and they are acting like that, and that's their mindset. I'm a third grader, but I'm in a new classroom and I'm called a fourth grader. And fifth grade, at the end of fourth grade, there is a difference in their learning and countenance of understanding that they're going into fifth and third coming into fourth. And I think I've had to learn not to teach my fourth graders the way I teach my fifth graders, and not to expect the same level of accountability to them before they're really ready. And then the accountability I expect of my fifth graders. And so, yes, learning to teach to the level, especially because I do teach them together for a couple subjects, and then I teach them separate for some subjects. So having to put on my fourth grade cap and my fifth grade cap, and then taking it off when I teach them together, trying to not expect too much of the fourth grade, as much of the fourth graders that I would expect of the fifth graders. That's been a change.
I can't imagine teaching two grades at once, especially I feel like going into fifth grade, especially in elementary school where fifth grade's the top of the line, going from just having that atmosphere. That would be very interesting for sure.
Yeah.
And so with your change into the new school, I remember you talking about how the curriculum is different as well. So will you just share a little bit about that?
So in my previous years at the smaller private school, we used pretty much one curriculum for all subjects, and we had one curriculum that was for English. So you knew the style, you knew the testing style, you knew the way that you could give out your material and teach your material, because it was all one curriculum, and they're very, that's very easy. Coming into this new job, they use several curricula, and each one has a different slant, and I had to learn that to give more time to, let's say, math than I would have, because there's a lot of writing of sentences and proving yourself and evidence in your workbook, versus history. A lot of it was just was less workbook and more talking and more mapping and things like that. So having multiple curriculums, you have to really know what that curriculum is expecting of you to teach it well. versus having one curriculum where you just sort of, oh, I know the style of this curriculum. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And with your original curriculum, I think it's the same one, isn't it? The Abeka that we used when I was in school.
Yes, Abeka and Shirley English, right?
Yeah, that's so funny. So I remember specifically that it could be updated by now, but with the Abeka curriculum, that the tests were like tear out pages,
Mm-hmm.
and then teachers would just give it to their students. How do you think those assessments were based? I'm trying to think of how to phrase my question. How do you feel like those assessments were for your students?
If they
Because
were
it was
giving, if
based
they
on,
were accurate ways to give accurate assessment.
yes, there you go.
Okay. Um, well, at the elementary level, a lot of their learning is rote. It's you put the information in, the information comes out. There's not a lot of reasoning. So a lot of tests from that curriculum are things they've heard, they've taught, they've written, and they're just regurgitating it back out on a test. And so, did they memorize it? Were they listening in class? Did they do the homework? Versus now, so there is a place for that kind of test, but that doesn't take the onus off the teacher to make sure that the students know the material. It's easy to teach to a test in a curriculum like that. That's very rote and memory driven, whereas
Mm-hmm.
the curriculum I have now, a lot of it, you have to demonstrate your knowledge with giving examples and citing math is the first thing I think of, and is you have to cite your reasons for giving an answer. You have to write a sentence and say, where did I get this? Draw a model. And so you're teaching multiple skills in that kind of setting versus just memorizing and knowing your addition, your multiplication, your division, and your whatever addition and story problems. You're asking a lot more of the students, therefore you have to teach differently. Did I answer your question?
I think so, yeah. I mean, my question, you created the question out of what I was trying to say. So, yeah. And do you think so with the first curriculum that you taught or at your other school, more memorization and regurgitation of facts, at least at the younger level, versus now the curriculum is very reasoning and drawing models and very more interactive, so to speak? Do you think that the students are, or how do you feel the students understand the information? Do you feel like it's better the first way or better the second way?
Well, I wouldn't make it cut and dry. I would see that a blended, depends on the subject that we're talking about, but I think a blended assessment is better because some students are not good readers in understanding what's the question I'm being asked or what are they asking me to answer versus a very clearly write down what you memorized kind of test. Anybody can memorize something. Well, mostly, but some students are not going to succeed in an assessment that has reasoning and sentences to write because you have to train them how to read a question that you have to teach them how to read the questions in a test like that to be able to answer correctly. What are your clue words? What do you know? What do you see here that you remember? How would you answer? What numbers are you going to use? So part of it is teaching them how to understand assessments if you're going to not have the ones that are just rote, remember, memorize, and facts. And I didn't know that at
Ooh,
first.
yes, I love that.
Yeah, when I first started teaching at this school that uses this kind of curriculum, I didn't realize that, oh, I need to do that. And I felt like next year when I go into it, I'm going to go into it with my eyes open, teaching them how to do a test, even doing one assessment together and practicing how to do it. It's like taking an SAT or an ACT. A lot of times it's how they ask the question, not do you know something, it's how they ask the question.
That is such a valuable skill for a student to have, especially for those SAT or ACT. I remember doing SAT questions, and I'd get one sent to my email every day leading up to the SAT, and would give you a tip after it asked you the
Oh.
question of like how to read this question and what are some of the key things in this question that can make you doubt your answer if you don't
Mm.
fully do it. But I love that, having students teaching them how to read a question so that they understand fully what it's asking, and doing like a practice one where it's like, what is this asking? It reminds me of their curriculum, the curriculum my school uses right now. We're piloting it, is called Ready Math. And one of their protocols is the 3 reads. So the first time we read the problem, we're answering, what is this problem about? And then we read it again and we ask, what are we trying to find? Or what are we trying to find out? And then lastly, we read it again and they're like, what information is important? And
Mm.
then after those 3 things, students typically have a better understanding of what the question is.
Yeah.
And if I haven't prepared the lesson very well, I understand it better then too, because I know what it's asking us to do.
Do tell.
But yeah.
Yes. Oh, that is so cool. And I wish I had known that, especially with my 4th graders, because they're the ones that came in with the most difficulty in taking a math test that required sentences to answer. They could say, well, Mrs. Kuiper, I know how to write the equation that goes with this, but I don't know how to explain why I'm choosing that number or that variable. And so, yeah, now I would totally integrate your 3 questions into my teaching. That's awesome.
Cool. I like it.
Mm-hmm.
And so with all of the assessing that we've been chatting about, what do you think one of the biggest mistakes a teacher can make, maybe even a first year teacher can make when assessing students?
The assessment given by a curriculum does not know your students and does not know how your students learn. And so I give permission to teachers to cut and paste, pick and choose what questions will really demonstrate whether they know the curriculum or what you've taught, because some questions are just not all that, and if they miss them and they miss a lot of them, then they get discouraged and they think, why did I study? Why, what's the purpose of a test? We want to have them succeed so that they love learning. And it's okay to change a test. It's okay to take out questions or add questions that you have taken time in class with, and give them opportunities for success in them.
I'm like silently happy dancing over here because that is awesome advice. Like, just the idea that just because it's already created for you and it technically would be easier for you to just give what the curriculum gives you, taking the time to tailor it to your students, taking out questions that don't apply to them that you haven't learned in class. That's my biggest thing, is so many tests that teachers give have information on them that isn't the same as the way they learned in class. And how are you supposed to have students succeed if you're not teaching it to them?
Mm.
It blows my mind. But yes, loved everything you said there. That was
Oh.
awesome advice. So if you're listening and you go back and hear that again, because that was awesome. All right, so we have a few more minutes before we end our time here. And you already gave some awesome advice for some first year teachers. But what is one belief that you had to overcome as a teacher to be where you are today?
That I had to know it all. That the day began and ended with me. And man, you go observe a teacher in your school that's been there. Go bring them in and have them observe you. Talk to your colleagues. Share ideas, get ideas. We're not meant to be Lone Rangers, and Lone Ranger teachers, I think they burn out. Make yourself available and look for people that are available to help you, and don't feel like you have to know it all. Even after 35 years of teaching, I don't know it all. And I go to my fellow colleagues. Some of them are 28 years old and I'm beyond 28. And I'll say, wow, how would you do this in your classroom? Do you have an idea? And that we need that encouragement. We need that stimulation of our thoughts, and we need to build those relationships with our colleagues so that we feel like we're part of a bigger picture than just being a lone ranger.
Coming back full circle to the building relationships, not just with your students, but with your colleagues as well.
But I think building relationships with your fellow colleagues is a really good way to not have anything come up that is going to cause you to have divide in your staff, because then that's just one more component you've brought into already a difficult situation to be a teacher today, and you don't want staff issues. Find out about your colleagues, use them to your advantage, bring them in, share, have coffee together.
Yeah. Ooh, yes. I'm all about those coffee times.
Yep.
Yes. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here today and being my first ever interview podcast episode. It's so
my
exciting
privilege.
to get to be the first.
I totally enjoyed it more than I thought I was going to enjoy it. I love talking with you and your sister about school and teaching, so it just comes naturally. Yeah, you're a great host.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. All right. And our final question for today. What is your favorite math-related joke or pun?
Well, I have to say, as you and your sister were growing up, Dad had a favorite joke that whenever it came around to dessert or pie, he would always say, what, pie not round, pie are squared. Pie are squared.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So I remember that from your childhood. That was something that we used to laugh about around the table. But I think it goes with it too. Why do plants hate math? Why do plants hate math? Because it gives them square roots, So I think of you with math.
Yeah, I love it. Math-related puns and jokes are like my favorite thing ever. On my morning slides, I always have one for my students, and if I have the same one 2 days in a row, they let me know, you need to change it.
Can they count on you for changing one every day? Ha ha.
Maybe. Who knows? That might be some good odds on their part.
Oh no. Just when I think I have one up on you.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Bye, daughter.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. To find all the links and resources to things talked about in this episode, head on over to MissKuipersClassroom.com and click on podcast.